My name is Celeste, I'm 27 years old, and 3 years ago, my little sister didn't just have an affair with my husband, she stole him, married him, and shattered my entire world. Before I tell you how she came crawling back to my parents' front door, begging for a rescue that would force our family into an explosive final confrontation, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It all started on a Tuesday. I remember the late afternoon sun was streaming through my apartment window in Denver, casting long shadows across the floor. I was holding a cup of lukewarm tea, just staring out at the mountains, feeling quiet. For the first time in 3 years, the quiet didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like peace. A peace I had fought tooth and nail for. Then my phone rang. It was my mother, Patricia. I answered, expecting to hear about her garden club or the latest neighborhood gossip. But the voice on the other end wasn't my mother's. Not the one I knew. This voice was thin and tight, stretched like a wire about to snap. "She's here, Celeste," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Delilah is at the door." My blood ran cold. The teacup slipped from my fingers. It didn't shatter, just thudded onto the thick rug, a dull, heavy sound that echoed the sudden weight in my chest. Delilah. A name I hadn't said out loud in 3 years. A name that tasted like ash in my mouth. My little sister. What does she want? I managed to ask, my own voice a stranger to my ears. She's crying, my mother stammered, and I could hear muffled sobs in the background. She has the kids with her. She says Sterling, she says he threw her out. To understand why those 7 words felt like a gunshot to my soul, you need to understand what happened 3 years ago. You need to know how my world ended, not with a bang, but with a quiet, venomous whisper. Sterling and I were the golden couple. We'd been married for 4 years, living in a beautiful little house we'd bought in the suburbs. We had the kind of love you see in movies, or so I thought. We were planning for our future, talking about kids, about growing old together. Then came the accident. A blur of screeching tires, shattered glass, and a pain so white-hot it felt like my body was being ripped apart. I survived, but barely. I spent weeks in the hospital and months in physical therapy. My body was a roadmap of scars, and my spirit was broken. That's when Delilah stepped in. My pretty, charming little sister. She was there every day, ostensibly to help. She'd bring meals, fluff my pillows, and talk to Sterling. She was a constant presence, a smiling angel of mercy. Except her words were poison, delivered with a syrupy sweet smile. "Oh, Celeste, you're so brave," she'd say, her eyes lingering on the long, jagged scar on my arm. "I just worry Sterling won't see you the same way with those scars. Men can be so visual, you know?" I tried to laugh it off, but the words would burrow under my skin. When I cried from the pain of physical therapy, she'd pat my hand and look at Sterling with wide, concerned eyes. "She's just so fragile now," she'd murmur. "You have to be so strong for her." I saw him start to pull away. He wouldn't meet my eyes for as long. His touch became hesitant. I thought it was the stress of my recovery, the medical bills, the strain on our lives. I was a fool. I didn't realize he wasn't pulling away alone, he was being pulled toward her. The final nail in the coffin came on a night I was feeling particularly low. Sterling had said he was going to the store. Delilah was supposed to have left an hour ago. But the house was too quiet. A cold dread, a sickening intuition, washed over me. I limped out of our bedroom and down the hall toward the kitchen. I could hear their voices, low and intimate. I stopped, my body pressed against the cool wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. And then I heard her voice, clear as a bell, dripping with false concern. "She's just not the same strong woman you married anymore, Sterling. It's okay to admit that." I felt the air leave my lungs. Every doubt, every little pang of suspicion I'd pushed down, it all came rushing to the surface and solidified into a terrible, undeniable truth. My hand was on the doorframe, my knuckles white. I was ready to swing it open, ready to confront them, to scream, to shatter that perfect, treacherous little scene. My mouth opened to form her name. I didn't swing the door open. My hand froze on the frame, my body turning to ice. Confront them? What would I even say? In that moment, all I could do was listen to the poison seeping under the door. I heard Sterling's low murmur, the sound of him trying to soothe her. It was a tone he hadn't used with me in months. It was the sound of intimacy, of secrets. It was the sound of my marriage dying. I backed away from the door, silent as a ghost, and retreated to the bedroom. I didn't know how long I sat there in the dark, just staring at the wall, my mind a blank, roaring void. An hour? 2. It felt like a lifetime. Eventually, I heard the front door close softly. She was gone. A few minutes later, Sterling came into the bedroom. He flicked on the light and flinched when he saw me sitting on the edge of the bed. Celeste! You scared me. I thought you were asleep. Where were you, Sterling? I asked. My voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. I told you, I went to the store, he said, holding up a small plastic bag with a carton of milk in it. The prop. The alibi. No, I said, my eyes locking onto his. For the first time, I wasn't just looking at my husband. I was looking at a stranger. Where were you really? He had the decency to look away. He started fumbling with the bag, putting the milk on his bedside table as if that were a normal thing to do. He was stalling, his mind racing for a lie that would hold up. But I wasn't the fragile, broken woman from the hospital bed anymore. The pain, the months of being gaslit and manipulated, it had forged something hard and sharp inside of me. I heard you, I said quietly. I heard Delilah. His whole body went rigid. The color drained from his face. What are you talking about? She was just checking in. Making sure I was holding up okay. Holding up? I repeated the words, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. It sounded like a dog's bark. Holding up from what, Sterling? The terrible burden of having a wife who survived a car crash? The sheer exhaustion of having to live with someone who has scars? That's not fair, Celeste, he stammered, his eyes darting around the room, anywhere but at me. Don't you dare talk to me about what's fair, I said, my voice rising, gaining a strength I didn't know I had. I know what she's been doing. I know what she's been saying. 4 months. Little comments, here and there. About how I'm not the same. About how I'm damaged. I stood up, and he took an involuntary step back. I thought I was going crazy, I continued, my voice trembling now with a rage that was finally boiling over. I thought the pain medication was making me paranoid. I thought my own trauma was twisting her words, turning her concern into something ugly. But it wasn't me, was it? It was her. And it was you. You let her. You listened. I walked over to him until I was standing right in front of him, forcing him to look at me. I pointed to the long, pale scar that ran down my forearm. She told me you wouldn't be able to look at this, that it would disgust you. Is that true, Sterling? Does this disgust you? He couldn't speak. He just stared at the scar, his face a mask of guilt. Does it disgust you as much as the sight of you and my sister whispering in the kitchen disgusts me? A tear finally rolled down his cheek. Pathetic. It wasn't a tear of remorse. It was a tear of being caught. Celeste, it's not what you think. Then what is it? I pressed. Tell me. Explain to me how my own sister telling my husband that I'm not the woman he married anymore isn't exactly what I think it is. Explain to me how that's just her checking in. He finally crumbled. He sank onto the bed and put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook, but the sobs were silent. He wasn't crying for me. He was crying for himself. It just happened, he mumbled into his hands. After the accident, you were so distant. So in pain. She was just there. She understood what I was going through. It felt like a punch to the gut. The sheer, breathtaking selfishness of it. I was the one who had almost died. I was the one living with chronic pain, fighting every single day to learn how to walk properly again, to feel like myself again. And he had the audacity to make himself the victim. She understood, I repeated numbly. And I didn't. He looked up at me, his eyes red and pleading. It's not like that. We haven't, nothing physical has happened. It was the oldest lie in the book. The last refuge of a cheater trying to minimize the damage. But it didn't matter. The physical part was almost irrelevant. The betrayal was complete. He had taken his vows to me, his promise to love me in sickness and in health, and he had handed them over to my sister because she was easier. Because she wasn't scarred. I want to believe you, Sterling, I said, and the lie tasted foul on my tongue. I really do. He saw a glimmer of hope. He started to stand up, to reach for me. We can fix this, Celeste. I'll tell her to stay away. We can go to counseling. We can. But first, I interrupted, my voice turning to steel, I want to see your phone. The hope in his eyes died instantly. It was replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. What? Why? That's my privacy. We are long past privacy, Sterling, I said, holding out my hand. Give me the phone. He stared at my outstretched hand like it was a venomous snake. He knew. I knew. We both knew what I would find. The charade was over. The only thing left was to see the proof, to let the final, brutal truth burn away everything we had ever been. Give it to me, I said again, my voice deathly quiet. Now. He didn't move. He just stood there, clutching the phone to his chest like a holy relic. That was all the confirmation I needed. I didn't have to see the messages. I didn't have to read the words. His panic was the confession. So that's it, then, I said, a strange calmness washing over me. It was the calm that comes after the storm has already ripped your house from its foundations. There's nothing left to be afraid of. I turned my back on him and walked to the closet. I pulled out a suitcase, the one we'd used for our honeymoon in Hawaii. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. I opened it on the bed and started taking clothes from my drawers, folding them mechanically. T-shirts. Jeans. Sweaters. Celeste, what are you doing? Sterling's voice was high-pitched, frantic. Don't do this. We can talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, I said without looking at him. You did your talking in the kitchen with my sister. It seems you two have it all figured out. He rushed over and grabbed my arm. Please, just stop and listen to me. I wrenched my arm away from him. Don't touch me, I spat, and the venom in my own voice surprised me. Don't you ever touch me again. He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. And in that moment, something inside him finally broke. The lies, the excuses, they all just evaporated, leaving behind the ugly, shriveled truth. I love her, Celeste, he whispered. The words hung in the air between us, obscene and monstrous. I think I'm in love with her. There it was. Not just an affair. Not a mistake. He loved her. My sister. The words didn't just break my heart, they vaporized it. There was nothing left but a black, empty hole where it used to be. I stopped packing. I just stood there, staring at the wall, seeing nothing. He took my silence as an invitation to keep talking, to pour out his disgusting, selfish confession. It started after you came home from the hospital, he rambled, words spilling out of him now. She would stay after you fell asleep. We would just talk, for hours. She saw me, Celeste. She saw how hard it was for me. She didn't look at me with those sad, broken eyes you had. She made me feel like a man again. Not just a nurse. Every word was a fresh stab wound. He was painting me as the villain of his story. My pain was an inconvenience. My trauma was a burden. My very existence was the reason he had sought comfort in the arms of my sister. I finally turned to look at him. I looked him up and down, from his tear-stained face to his trembling hands, and I felt nothing. No love. No hate. Just a profound, chilling emptiness. The man I had married was gone. Maybe he had never existed at all. "Get out," I said. "What?" "Get out of this room," I repeated, my voice hard as flint. "I have to pack. And I don't want to look at you for one more second." He opened his mouth to argue, saw the look on my face, and shut it again. He backed out of the room, closing the door softly behind him, leaving me alone with the ruins of my life. And then I broke. The sobs came from a place so deep inside me I didn't recognize it. It was a raw, animal sound of pure agony. I collapsed onto the floor, my body convulsing, the suitcase of my neatly folded future lying open on the bed above me. I cried for my broken body, for my broken heart, for the sister I had loved and the husband I had trusted. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut, until there were simply no tears left. I don't know how long I lay there. But eventually, the storm passed, leaving a dead, silent calm. I got up. I washed my face. I walked back to the closet and I didn't pack a suitcase. I packed boxes. It took me 2 days. He stayed out of the house, crashing on a friend's couch, I assumed. He sent me pathetic, pleading text messages which I deleted without reading. My parents called. My mom, Patricia, was crying, asking me to reconsider, to think about my vows. My dad, Robert, was quiet, but I could hear the anger simmering beneath the surface. "Just tell me what you need, Celeste," he said. "Whatever you need." I needed out. I found a small, one-bedroom apartment for rent near downtown Denver. It was soulless and beige, with cheap carpets and a view of a brick wall. It was perfect. On the 3rd day, my dad and my Aunt Joan, his sister, showed up with a moving truck. They didn't ask questions. They just started carrying boxes. As they were loading the last of my things, I walked through the house one last time. Our house. It was just a building now, filled with furniture that belonged to a different person, a different life. I took off my wedding ring and set it on the polished granite of the kitchen counter, right where I imagined they had stood, whispering. A final, silent statement. Then I walked out and didn't look back. The first night in my new apartment was the longest night of my life. I didn't have a bed yet, just a mattress on the floor. I didn't unpack. I just sat in the middle of the living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes that held the shattered pieces of my past. The silence was deafening. It was the silence of total, absolute aloneness. The quiet I had craved for years had finally come, and it was a crushing weight. And in that empty apartment, surrounded by boxes and the ghosts of a life that was no longer mine, I felt a loneliness so profound, it's a feeling I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. If you're still listening, please do me a favor and like this video, then comment the number 1 below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me that you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a bigger encouragement than you can possibly imagine. Just comment the number 1, and then let me tell you what happened next. What happened next wasn't a quick recovery. It wasn't a movie montage where I got a new haircut, threw myself into my work, and emerged a month later, healed and powerful. What happened next was ugly, and it was slow. It was 3 years of silence. 3 years of learning how to breathe again. The first few months were a blur of logistics and pain. I hired a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who handled the divorce with brutal efficiency. Sterling didn't fight it. I think he was too much of a coward to face me, even through legal channels. He agreed to everything. I got the majority of our shared assets, not that there was much. He could have the house. I never wanted to set foot in it again. The real work was internal. I started seeing a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Anya, who helped me unpack the layers of betrayal. It wasn't just Sterling. In many ways, what Delilah did was so much worse. A husband can leave you. That's a tragedy that happens every day. But a sister? Your own blood? How do you recover from a wound that deep? My dad and Aunt Joan were my rocks. Dad would show up at my apartment every Saturday morning with coffee and donuts, and he'd just sit with me. He didn't push me to talk. He just provided a steady, quiet presence that told me I wasn't alone. Aunt Joan was the opposite. She was fire and fury. He's a spineless worm, and she's a viper, she'd say over our weekly dinners. Good riddance to both of them. You're better off, Celeste, even if it doesn't feel like it now. Her anger felt good. It was validating. It made me feel like I wasn't crazy for feeling so enraged. My relationship with my mother, however, became complicated. Patricia has always been a peacemaker. She hates conflict. In her world, family is a sacred, unbreakable institution, no matter how toxic its members are. She couldn't comprehend the finality of what had happened. But she's your sister, she'd say over the phone, her voice laced with a pleading sorrow that grated on my last nerve. Maybe if you two just talked. Talked about what, Mom? I'd reply, my voice flat. About how she systematically dismantled my confidence while I was recovering from a near-fatal accident so she could sleep with my husband? What's there to say? She'd fall silent, and the chasm between us would grow wider. She never fully cut Delilah off. In her mind, she was just being a mother to both her children. To me, it felt like a constant, low-grade betrayal. And through her, the painful updates would trickle in, like little drops of poison. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Mom called. I just thought you should know, she began, her voice hesitant. Delilah and Sterling, they're engaged. I remember hanging up the phone and just staring at my hands, watching them tremble. It was one thing to know it was happening. It was another to have it confirmed, to have a label put on their treachery. Engaged. A word meant for love and promise, now tainted and grotesque. A year after that, it was the wedding. Mom didn't go, thank God. Even she couldn't cross that line. But Delilah sent her a whole album of professional photos. And one day, when I was visiting my parents, I saw it, sitting on the coffee table. My mother had accidentally left it out. I saw her, my sister, in a white dress, smiling up at my ex-husband. They were dancing, cutting a cake, surrounded by his family and her friends. They had stolen my life and were wearing it like a costume. I walked out of my parents' house that day without saying a word, and I didn't speak to my mother for a month. Then came the babies. First, a boy. Then, a little over a year later, a girl. Each time, my mother would call me, her voice filled with the joy of being a grandmother, a joy I knew she felt was stolen from her with me. She'd talk about the babies, about their little hands and their smiles, and I would just listen, a hollow ache spreading through my chest. Those children were my nieces, my nephews. And I would never know them. They were the innocent fruit of a poisonous tree. During those years, I worked. I poured everything I had into my job as a graphic designer. I took on extra projects. I worked late. It was easier than going home to an empty apartment. I got a promotion. I started saving money, rebuilding the financial security that had been ripped out from under me. I made a few friends. I even went on a couple of dates, though they never went anywhere. It was hard to trust again. It was hard to believe that anyone could be what they seemed. The topic of my parents' will and the family inheritance came up once. My dad, ever the pragmatist, wanted to get things in order. He sat me down and told me he was restructuring it, ensuring my share was protected in a trust, separate from anything else. "It's just business, Celeste," he said, but I knew what he meant. He was building a firewall. He was protecting me from her, even in death. Slowly, painfully, I built a new life. The grief was still there, but it wasn't a roaring inferno anymore. It was more like embers that would occasionally flare up on a bad day. I had my apartment, my job, my small circle of people I trusted. I had my peace. A fragile peace, built on a foundation of carefully constructed walls. And for 3 years, that's how it was. A silent, steady truce with my past. Until that Tuesday. Until the phone call that brought the ghost back to my parents' door. I grabbed my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition of my car. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Peace. What a joke! 3 years of work, of therapy, of carefully rebuilding my life, and it could all be undone by a single phone call. The drive to my parents' house in the suburbs was a 20-minute blur of traffic lights and rising panic. What was I going to do? What was I going to say? Part of me wanted to turn the car around and just go home, lock the door, and pretend none of this was happening. But I couldn't. This wasn't just about Delilah anymore. This was about my parents. This was about that fragile peace I had built, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that if I didn't fight for it now, I would lose it forever. I pulled up to the house, the same house I had grown up in, and it looked alien to me. I took a deep breath, got out of the car, and walked to the front door. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. And there she was. Delilah was sitting on my mother's floral sofa, the one she'd had for 30 years. She was curled up, looking small and pathetic, a tissue clutched in her hand. Her perfect blonde hair was a mess, her makeup was smeared down her cheeks, and her designer clothes were rumpled. 2 small children, a boy of about 2 and a baby girl in a car seat, were on the floor beside her. She was putting on the performance of a lifetime. My mother was hovering over her, patting her shoulder, her face a mess of pity and distress. My father was standing by the fireplace, his arms crossed, his expression like thunder. His eyes met mine across the room, and I saw a flicker of relief. Delilah looked up as I walked in, and her eyes widened. Her performance faltered for a second. I don't think she expected me to come. "Celeste," she breathed, as if she were seeing a ghost. I didn't say anything to her. I didn't even look at her. I directed my words to my mother. "What is going on?" My mother rushed over to me, grabbing my hands. Her palms were sweaty. "Oh, Celeste, it's terrible," she whispered. "Sterling, he's been having an affair. 4 months. He has another family, another woman, another child. He told Delilah he wants a divorce, and he threw her out. He changed the locks on the house. She has nothing. Nowhere to go." I stared at my mother, a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach. The irony was so thick, so suffocating, I almost laughed. Karma hadn't just knocked on my sister's door, it had kicked it down and set the house on fire. "So she came here," I said, my voice flat. "Of course she came here," my mother said, looking at me as if I were being unreasonable. "This is her home. We're her family." I pulled my hands out of hers. "Right." I could feel Delilah's eyes on me, watching, waiting. She started to sob again, louder this time, a theatrical, heaving cry designed to pull at our mother's heartstrings. It was working. "We have to do something," my mother said, wringing her hands. "She can't stay on the street with the children. Maybe she could stay here. Just for a little while. Just until she gets back on her feet." The guest room is empty. It would only be for a few nights. And there it was. The request I had been dreading since the moment the phone rang. The absolute shattering of my boundary. I turned to my mother, and I'm sure the look on my face was terrifying because she actually flinched. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the room with the force of a gunshot. Delilah's crying hitched. My mother stared at me, her mouth agape. "Celeste, be reasonable," she pleaded. "Look at her. She's your sister." "She stopped being my sister 3 years ago," I said, my voice dangerously low. "She stopped being my sister the day she decided to sleep with my husband while I was recovering from a car accident that almost killed me." "That was a long time ago," my mother said weakly. "People make mistakes." "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk from the store," I shot back, my voice rising. "A mistake is not systematically destroying your sister's life and then marrying the man who helped you do it. That's not a mistake, Mom. That's a character flaw. A deep, rotten, unchangeable flaw." I took a step closer to her, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You are asking me to be okay with her being here. In this house. The house I come to for holidays. The house that is supposed to be my safe place. You are asking me to sit at the same dinner table with the woman who blew up my entire world and then danced on the ashes." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "But the children, they're my grandchildren, Celeste. They're innocent. I can't just turn them away." It was her final card. The innocent children. And it was a good one. But I had my own. I looked my mother dead in the eye. "And I am your daughter," I said, my voice trembling with the force of 3 years of repressed pain. The one she already destroyed. "Are you asking me to let her do it all over again, under your roof? Because you need to understand something right now. If you choose to let her stay here, you are choosing her over me. And I will not come back. Not for Christmas. Not for your birthday. Never. You will have one daughter left." The ultimatum hung in the air between us, heavy and unbreakable. My father, who had been silent this whole time, finally moved. He walked over and stood beside me, putting a firm, steady hand on my shoulder. He didn't say a word, but his message was clear. He was with me. My mother looked from my face to my father's, then over at Delilah, who had stopped crying and was now watching us with wide, calculating eyes. The performance was over. This was the real show. My mother was trapped, forced to make a choice she had avoided for 3 long years. The peacemaker had to go to war. The silence in the living room was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. My mother stood frozen between me and my sister, her face a canvas of anguish. She was caught in the crossfire of a war she had desperately tried to pretend wasn't happening. Delilah was watching her, her tear-streaked face a mask of manipulative pity. My father's hand was a warm, heavy weight on my shoulder, a silent anchor in the storm. And then, the front door opened again. "I brought lasagna," a voice boomed from the entryway. I figured nobody would feel like cooking. It was my Aunt Joan. She walked into the living room, a large casserole dish in her hands, a cheerful smile on her face. Then she stopped dead. She took in the scene in one sweeping glance, me and my dad, a united front of stone, my mother, looking like she was about to shatter, and Delilah, curled on the couch with 2 children at her feet. Aunt Joan's smile vanished. She set the lasagna down on the entryway table with a firm thud. She was a tall woman, my aunt, with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She had never been fooled by Delilah, not for a second. Well, she said, her voice dripping with an irony so cold it could freeze fire. "Look what the cat dragged in. And I see it brought its baggage." Delilah flinched as if she'd been struck. "Aunt Joan," she began, her voice trembling, ready to launch back into her victim narrative. "Don't you Aunt Joan me," my aunt snapped, walking further into the room and planting her hands on her hips. "I heard what happened. Your little fairy tale imploded. Shocker. Anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together could have told you that a man who cheats with you will cheat on you. It's not rocket science. That's not fair, Delilah whimpered. You don't know the whole story. Oh, I know the story, Aunt Joan shot back, her voice ringing with righteous anger. I know the story of a young woman who was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life, while her own sister was in her kitchen, cozying up to her husband. I know the story of a girl who danced at her wedding on the ashes of her sister's marriage. So you can save the tears, Delilah. The waterworks are wasted on me. She turned her sharp gaze on my mother. And you, Patricia. Don't tell me you were actually considering letting her stay here. My mother wrung her hands. Joan, the children. The children are innocent, yes, Aunt Joan conceded, her voice softening for a fraction of a second as she glanced at the little boy staring at them with wide, confused eyes. And their situation is tragic. But their mother's poor choices are not Celeste's burden to bear. Not anymore. This girl, she said, pointing a finger at me, has spent 3 years putting herself back together piece by piece from the wreckage you two, she jabbed her finger towards Delilah, left behind. And you are not going to let her walk in here and tear it all down again. Not on my watch. Aunt Joan's fury was like a cleansing fire. It burned away all the pity and the obligation and the guilt, leaving only the cold, hard truth. She was saying everything I had felt but couldn't articulate, everything my father felt but was too quiet to say. Her words gave him the final push he needed. My dad, Robert, finally spoke, and his voice, though quiet, commanded the room. Joan is right, he said, his hand squeezing my shoulder. He stepped forward, addressing not just Delilah, but all of us. He was no longer a passive observer. He was the head of this family, and he was taking control. Delilah, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. What Sterling did to you is terrible. And you are here with your children, and you need help. We will not turn our backs on you completely. I felt a jolt of panic, but my dad held his hand up slightly, signaling for me to wait. But you cannot stay here, he said, his words absolute and final. It is not fair to Celeste, and it is not healthy for this family. Your presence in this house is a wound we are not going to reopen. He took a deep breath. Here is what we are going to do. Your mother and I will help you find a small, furnished apartment to rent. We will pay the security deposit and the first month's rent. We will also pay for 1 month of childcare so you have time to find a job. I know a good family lawyer, I will give you his number. He can help you with the divorce and fighting for child support and custody. We will give you a hand up, Delilah. But we will not give you a handout. After 1 month, you are on your own. You are a mother now. It is time to be an adult. The plan was brilliant. It was compassionate yet firm. It offered help without offering comfort. It protected my boundaries while still acknowledging her crisis. It was the perfect, logical solution. It removed all the emotion and left only the practical facts. My mother looked relieved. Aunt Joan nodded in approval. I felt a wave of gratitude for my father so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. He had seen me. He had heard me. He had protected me. We all looked at Delilah. The stage was set. Her audience was waiting. We had offered her a lifeline, a reasonable, respectable path forward. We all waited for her response. A thank you, perhaps? An ounce of gratitude for the family that was still willing to help her after she had betrayed them so completely? We should have known better. For a long moment, Delilah just sat there, processing. I could almost see the gears turning in her head. She looked from my father's resolute face, to my aunt's unyielding stare, to my mother's pleading eyes, and finally, to me. Her expression shifted. The mask of the weeping victim dissolved, and underneath was something I hadn't seen in years, but recognized instantly: the spoiled, entitled rage of a child who had just been told no. Her face, which had been pale and tear-streaked, began to flush with a deep, blotchy red. Her blue eyes, once filled with crocodile tears, now glittered with malice. "An apartment," she said, her voice a low, incredulous hiss. "You want to stick me and my children in some depressing little apartment?" My father's jaw tightened. "We want to help you get on your feet, Delilah. That is more than you deserve." "More than I deserve?" she shrieked, lurching to her feet. The sudden movement startled her little boy, who began to cry. She completely ignored him. "I am your daughter. My life is falling apart. My husband, the man you all hated, has left me with nothing. And your solution is to throw a little money at me and send me away?" "Our solution is to help you take responsibility for your life," Aunt Joan said calmly, but her eyes were like chips of ice. Delilah whirled on her. "You stay out of this. This is a family matter." "Celeste is my family," Joan shot back without missing a beat. "And I'm not going to stand here and watch you try to emotionally blackmail your parents after what you did to her." That's when Delilah's rage found its true target, me. She pointed a trembling finger in my direction. "This is because of her, isn't it?" she snarled. "It's always been about her. Saint Celeste. Perfect Celeste. The one who could do no wrong. The one who had the perfect husband, the perfect house, the perfect life." "The life you stole," I said quietly, the words dropping into the tense air like stones. "Stole?" she laughed, a high, unhinged sound that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "I didn't steal anything. Sterling came to me. He was suffocating with you, with your constant sadness and your victim act after the accident. I saved him. I gave him a real family, real happiness. And look how that turned out for you," my father said, his voice dangerously low. His comment was like throwing gasoline on a fire. She rounded on him. "This is your fault too. You were always so much harder on me. You always preferred her. You paid for her entire college education, but when I needed help, you told me to get a job. We paid for Celeste's college because she got a scholarship that covered half of it," my dad said, his voice shaking with restrained anger. "We offered you the same deal. You chose to drop out after one semester to go backpacking in Europe with your boyfriend. Do not try to rewrite history." Her face contorted, realizing her attack wasn't working. So she came back to her main point, her one, true grievance. That she was the victim, and I was the obstacle. "I can't believe this," she said, shaking her head as if we were all insane. "I come to you, my family, at the lowest point in my life, homeless, with 2 babies, and you're worried about her feelings? My God, it's been 3 years. She needs to get over herself." The room went completely silent. The audacity of those words sucked all the air out of my lungs. Get over it. As if the complete and utter demolition of my life, my marriage, and my trust in humanity was like a common cold you could just recover from. She wasn't done. She turned to me, her eyes blazing with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "You have no idea what it's like," she screamed, spit flying from her mouth. "You sit there in your quiet little apartment with your little job and your little life, judging me. I have kids. I have children who depend on me. My needs are more important right now. My pain is bigger than your pain." It was, without a doubt, the most narcissistic, self-absorbed, and delusional thing I had ever heard a human being say. It was a tantrum of epic proportions. And in that ugly, twisted moment, I felt a strange sense of peace. It was validation. This was the real Delilah. The mask was gone. This selfish, screaming, utterly shameless creature was the person who had betrayed me. And now, finally, my whole family could see her, too. I looked at my mother. Her face was ashen, her mouth slightly open in horror. She was finally seeing her baby girl for what she truly was. I looked at my father. His face was a thundercloud of rage, his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. I looked at Aunt Joan, who just slowly shook her head, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. Delilah stood there in the middle of the room, breathing heavily, her chest heaving. She had laid all her cards on the table, expecting her emotional explosion to make us all fold. She expected us to cower, to apologize, to give her what she wanted just to make the screaming stop. She had miscalculated. Badly. There was nothing left to say. The truth of who she was had been laid bare for all to see. The silence that followed her tirade was not the silence of contemplation. It was the silence of a final judgment being passed. Delilah seemed to realize her mistake a moment too late. The stunned silence in the room wasn't the prelude to her victory, it was the quiet before a final door slammed shut. Her face began to crumble again, but this time, nobody was buying the act. "Fine," she spat, her voice thick with venom. "I see how it is. I never should have come here. I should have known you would all choose her." She snatched her purse off the floor, grabbed her crying toddler by the arm with a little too much force, and clumsily scooped the car seat holding the baby into her other arm. She didn't look at any of us as she stormed out of the house, slamming the front door so hard that a picture frame on the wall rattled. We were left in the echoing silence, the ugly residue of her tantrum hanging in the air like toxic smoke. My mother finally sank onto the couch and started to cry, but these were different tears. They weren't tears of pity for Delilah, they were tears of disillusionment and grief for the daughter she thought she knew. My father walked over to the window and watched Delilah load the kids into her car and speed away. He stood there for a long time, his back to us, his shoulders slumped. "Well," Aunt Joan said, breaking the silence as she picked up the now-cold lasagna. "I'm going to heat this up. We all need to eat." It was her practical way of dealing with a crisis. Life goes on, even after a hurricane. The next few days were quiet. My parents were in a state of shock. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't have to. A fundamental shift had occurred in our family. The fractured loyalty, the unspoken resentments, it had all been brought out into the open and cauterized by Delilah's own rage. For the first time, we were all on the same side. I thought that was the end of it. I thought Delilah would find some other friend to manipulate, some other resource to drain. I thought we had finally, blessedly, achieved peace. I was wrong. This wasn't the end. It was just the opening salvo in her new war. A week later, I got another frantic call from my mother. She was hysterical. "Celeste, you have to come over," she sobbed into the phone. "You won't believe it. They're here." "Who's here, Mom?" "Calm down," I said, my own heart starting to pound. "A woman," she choked out. "A woman from the state. From Child Protective Services." I felt my blood run cold for the second time in as many weeks. I was at their house in 15 minutes. A sensible-looking woman in a blue pantsuit was sitting at my parents' kitchen table, a notepad in front of her. My mother was crying. My father was sitting opposite the woman, his face pale and grim, looking 10 years older than he had a week ago. The woman introduced herself as Ms. Albright. She was polite but firm. "We received an anonymous report," she explained, her eyes scanning the clean, tidy kitchen. "The report alleged that this is an unsafe environment. That the residents here are elderly, unstable, and unable to provide a safe home for minor children." It was so transparently absurd that it would have been laughable if it weren't so terrifying. My parents, in their immaculate suburban home, being accused of being unfit. "And who made this report?" my father asked, his voice dangerously calm. "As I said, it was anonymous," Ms. Albright replied. The caller expressed concern for her nieces. Said their grandmother was emotionally volatile and their grandfather was aggressive. The final pieces clicked into place. This was Delilah's revenge. She couldn't get what she wanted through pity, so she had resorted to malice. She had tried to burn their lives down. She had weaponized her own children, using them as pawns in a sick, twisted game to punish our parents for not siding with her. This was a new level of depravity, even for her. A possible custody battle was a terrifying prospect for my parents, who would be dragged into a legal mess. Ms. Albright was professional. She toured the house, checked the pantry, looked in the bedrooms. She asked my parents a series of humiliating questions about their health, their finances, their emotional stability. She saw, of course, that the claim was baseless. After an hour that felt like an eternity, she closed her notepad. "Well," she said, a hint of weary sympathy in her voice. "It's clear to me that this is a safe and loving home. These anonymous calls, unfortunately, we have to investigate every one. Often, they're used as a tool in bitter family disputes." She handed my father her card. "If you have any more trouble, don't hesitate to call. I'll make a note in the file that this report was unfounded." After she left, my mother collapsed into a chair, completely undone. "I can't believe she would do this," she whispered, her voice filled with a pain that was awful to witness. "To use her own babies. To try and hurt us like this." My father didn't say anything. He walked over to the phone, his face set like granite. He looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a cold, hard fire I had never seen before. He picked up the receiver and dialed a number from memory. I could hear the phone ring on the other end, and then I heard Delilah's voice, tentative and wary. "Hello?" And then my father spoke. His voice was not the voice of the quiet, gentle man who brought me donuts on Saturdays. This was the voice of a patriarch pushed too far, a father whose love had finally been curdled into righteous fury. "Delilah," he said, and the name was an indictment. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." "Dad? I don't know what you're talking about," she started to say, her voice full of fake innocence. "Stop," he commanded, and the power in that single word made her fall silent. "Just stop. We know it was you. We know you called CPS. We know you tried to use your children to destroy your mother and me." He took a deep breath. "I have loved you your whole life. I have excused your behavior. I have enabled your selfishness. I have hoped that one day you would grow up. I was wrong." His voice dropped, becoming grave and heavy with a terrible finality. "You didn't just betray your sister. You tried to destroy your mother and me. We are done. Do not call this house again. Do not send pictures of the children. Do not ask for money. If you need to communicate about a family emergency, you can do it through your Aunt Joan's lawyer. You are no longer our daughter." He slammed the phone down into its cradle. The crash echoed through the silent house. The tie was cut. The war was over. And all that was left was the devastating, deafening silence of a family that had finally, irrevocably, broken. In the weeks that followed, a strange quiet settled over our lives. It wasn't the tense, resentful silence we'd had for the past 3 years. It was a solemn, mournful quiet, the kind that comes after a long and painful funeral. We had buried a part of our family. Delilah was gone. Not just from our homes, but from our lives. She made no attempt to contact us. I think even she knew that she had finally crossed a line from which there was no return. The change in my mother was profound. The constant, anxious energy she'd had, the worry of trying to juggle 2 warring daughters, it all just drained away. She was quieter, sadder, but also more present. The veil of denial had been ripped away, and while the truth was ugly, it was also liberating. She no longer had to pretend. About a month after my father's final phone call, my mother asked me to come over for dinner, just the 2 of us. Dad and Aunt Joan were out for the evening. When I got there, she had cooked my favorite meal from when I was a child, chicken pot pie. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, and then she put down her fork and looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm sorry, Celeste," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I am so sorry." "Mom, you don't have to." I started to say, but she held up a hand. "No, I do," she insisted. "I need to say this. For 3 years, I was a coward. I saw your pain, and I tried to smooth it over instead of facing it. I was so afraid of losing a daughter that I ended up hurting the one who needed me most. I kept making excuses for her. I kept hoping she would change. I didn't want to see what was right in front of me." A single tear rolled down her cheek. "When that woman from CPS was in our kitchen, questioning me, looking at me like I was some kind of monster, that's when I finally understood. What Delilah did to you wasn't a mistake. It's who she is. And what I did to you, by not standing with you, by not protecting you, that was my mistake. And it was a terrible one. Can you ever forgive me?" I reached across the table and took her hand. It felt frail in mine. "I already have, Mom," I said, and I meant it. We sat there for a long time, just holding hands across the table. It felt like a broken bone had finally been set correctly. The healing could finally begin. Our family is smaller now. Holidays are quieter. There's an empty chair at the table that no one talks about. There's a sadness there, a ghost of what we used to be. But we are also more honest. We are stronger. There are no more secrets, no more walking on eggshells. Aunt Joan, Dad, Mom, and I, we've become a tight, solid unit. We have dinner together every Sunday. We laugh more than we used to. The cloud of Delilah's drama that hung over us for so long has lifted. As for me, I'm okay. More than okay. I'm good. The peace I have now isn't the fragile, brittle peace I had before. It's a deep, resilient peace, forged in fire and earned through pain. I still have my scars, both inside and out. They are a part of my story, a reminder of what I survived. But they don't define me anymore. I'm still at the same company, but my promotion has led to more creative, fulfilling work. I've started dating someone, a kind, funny man who knows my story and isn't afraid of it. It's slow, and it's new, but it feels hopeful. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Delilah and her children. I wonder if she ever feels a flicker of remorse. I wonder if those innocent kids will ever know the truth of what she did, of the family she threw away. I hope they're okay. But I have accepted that their life, their story, is no longer a part of mine. My father's final phone call wasn't just an act of anger, it was an act of liberation. He freed us all. This morning, I was sitting on the small balcony of my apartment, a cup of hot coffee in my hands, watching the sun rise over the Rocky Mountains. The air was crisp and clean. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. And for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, I took a deep breath, and it didn't hurt. I just felt free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It means the world to me to be able to share it. If any part of this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. What's one piece of advice you would give to someone learning to set boundaries with a difficult family member? Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for being here with me.